This is 11.4, energy in ecosystems. We're going to be looking at energy flow through the ecosystems from death to life, producers to consumers to decomposers and all the things. Let's do that. So energy in ecosystems comes from the sun. Of course, there's some ecosystems that don't have the sun. We'll get to that in just a moment. And then there are organisms that can take energy from the sun and make food out of it. Or you could say produce food from that energy. These are called producers. They do photosynthesis. What if there's no sun? They don't do photosynthesis. They do something called chemosynthesis, which they take some sort of inorganic chemical and use the energy from breaking that down in order to make glucose. You don't need to know the ins and outs of that. That's basically what that is, though. So producers are making food at the bottom of their ecosystem. Then, of course, you're going to have things that consume that food. They're called consumers. This is going to be lots of different stuff, right? It's going to be like your herbivores that eat plants, your carnivores that eat meat, your omnivores that eat both. Your detritivores, never heard that one before probably. Detritivores, they eat like dead material, like a scavenger maybe, but not a decomposer, because a decomposer is its own thing, right? Decomposers, these are organisms that break down organisms to return those nutrients back to the ecosystem. That's important, right? They're still part of the energy flow of that ecosystem, but they are returning all the nutrients back to the ecosystem so that that ecosystem can be replenished. This is like bacteria and fungi will be the primary decomposers in an ecosystem. This basic chain of events can be represented on a food chain, which is sometimes helpful, showing these fairly simple chain of relationships in an ecosystem. But it doesn't really tell the whole picture, right? The ecosystem involves more than tree creepers and hawks and caterpillars and oak tree leaves. There's a lot more going on, so we need something bigger. We need a whole web. The WikiHow web. I just noticed that. Oh, never mind. Okay, so you have the producers at the bottom. You get the grass and the cactuses and the something that I can't see all of because it's too blurry. These are all producers. They're making food, and then there's something eating those, right? Like the kangaroo rat is eating that thing, but it's not eating grass, right? And then there's several things that are eating the kangaroo rat because everybody loves the kangaroo rat, right? And these are going to be things that are eating that. And then look, notice what bacteria is eating. Yes, it is, because bacteria is the decomposer, right? Nothing's eating the hawk except for the bacteria. And so you get the idea. This shows all the interactions that are in a community. All of those interactions are shown in this food web. And you can almost see these different levels, right? Like trophic levels. Okay, yeah, trophic levels. These are like feeding levels. A couple of things to talk about here. So all the energy is going to be at the bottom because this is what's closest to the energy source, right? As you can see, as a little bit of energy is lost in each one of those transactions as heat. But like the grass needs to like live and move and have its being, right? So does the bees and the hawks and the snakes and the thing at the top. The hawks, they need to do that too. And so each time they have to live and move and have their being, that's going to take some energy, and there's only going to be a little bit of energy left over at the next for the next trophic level. And so that little bit is typically 10%. There's only around 10% of energy from the previous left over for the next. See, look, that 20,000 for grass. It's going to spend 18,000 on doing grass things, and when the caterpillars and the mice eat it, it's going to have 2,000 calories worth of food, right? And then as you go up, 222, you get the idea. So you can't have a whole lot of hawks in this population because there's not a lot of calories for them, right? And so this shows that trophic level structure. At the very top, the thing that nothing is eating is called the apex predator. I just put a picture of an apex predator in here because I like wolves. Nothing's eating the wolves except for maybe the bacteria. And maybe something will eat a wolf, like a bear or something like that. But it's not going to be a normal thing. The apex predator is at the very top. Of course, it kind of keeps the whole ecosystem in balance. Sometimes you'll see them called like a keystone species. Not every time, but a lot of times the apex predator is going to be the keystone for the whole ecosystem, kind of keep it all together. Now, ecosystems can be seen in three pyramids. We already talked about the energy pyramid, and that means that it gets smaller toward the top. It's the amount of energy. Well, so does the biomass. Biomass is the dry mass of an organism if you take all the water out. right? It's what you have left. There's a lot of biomass at the bottom. This is like plants, and trees, and whatnot. As you go up and you get to the turtles and the snails, there's going to be less. There's fish right after the snails? Are fish eating snails? I guess they are. They're not eating turtles, though. Anyway, there's less fish after that next level, right? Because, well, there's not as many calories left to them, so there's less. And then once you get to the gar, there's very few calories left. Same over here. This is the pyramid of numbers. So this is literally the amount of things that there's going to be. Once you get all the way to the third level consumers, there's very few foxes compared to the amount of shrews and tiny cats that are available for an ecosystem compared to the grass even, which is going to be a ton, right? And there's snakes that aren't as many as the rats, but the foxes are more or less than the snakes because there can only be very few because there's not enough energy. All these pyramids are kind of interrelated. So understanding energy starts at the sun, there's tons of it with the sun, and that energy decreases as you get to the top of the pyramid.